Earth is dying. It is no secret. According to The Guardian's 2014 article, we've already raised the Earth's temperature by 1 entire degree. This may seem negligible to us here in Florida who can see fluctuations of temperatures up to 30 degrees in a single day. However, we can already feel the devastating weather effects that climate change is having, as well as the species loss. So now we must examine, how is this happening and what are we doing to change it? My name is Emma Kirkpatrick, and by the end of my speech today, you will have a grasp on how farming affects our environment and what farmers are doing right now to help reverse these changes. It is no secret that farming takes up a lot of land. The United States Census Population Clock currently estimates the population of the Earth around 7.5 billion. That's about 7.5 billion mouths to feed, and we know from experience here at the University of Florida that that's no small feat. About 11% of the Earth's land is being taken up for agricultural uses right now, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations 2015 study. So we can deduce that at least 10% of global warming is contributed to by the agricultural practices being done on that 10% of land. Before we examine what farmers are doing right, we must know what they're doing wrong. How can we understand how to fix a problem if we don't understand the problem itself? Perhaps the most obvious contributing factor to climate change that farmers have is the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers that leach into the soil. Farmers apply these materials and they're subject to erosion when it rains and snows. Instead of being taken up by the plant, they leach into nearby bodies of water and into our groundwater. This can contribute to acid rain, and it can also contribute to algae blooms, which create loss of marine life and aquatic life under the surface. In some countries, other landscapes and rainforests are being burned or destroyed to create land for agricultural use. This is destruction of habitats for hundreds of species at any given time, both large and small. And we all know from our high school biology class that life is all interlinked in one big web, and the loss of even one species can have far-reaching impacts. Industrial farms also break up big tracts of land, which can interrupt territories of large animals and populations of smaller ones. This is habitat reduction and is just as contributive to species loss. Aside from the animals we can see, intensive farming also deprives our soil of not only microbial life, but also nutrients that are essential for plants. We have seen this at the Field and Fork Farm at the University of Florida, where there was a chicken coop area that was used for maybe 20 years straight, and that tract of land will no longer grow even weeds. Monoculture, or the growing of a single variety of a single crop, can also contribute to species loss. There's only a single type of banana being produced worldwide, commercially right now. If a new disease or insect arises, how am I going to get my morning banana? Now that we know what farmers are doing wrong, let's examine what they're doing to try to turn the tide against climate change and species loss. On high-tech farms, we can inject chemicals right into the water that's being taken up by the plants, meaning less erosion is possible. We can also practice organic farming and use nature's bounty in the form of fertilizers like compost and manure that won't leach right into the soil. Instead of burning forests, we can try to responsibly remove those trees, even using the lumber for mulching, which helps prevent leaching of chemicals in the future. Instead of intensive farming of one or even a few crops, we should have a smaller, more diversified farm. That will help uphold biodiversity and population numbers of insects like bees. Think about it. If there's a lettuce farm, industrialized, that takes up 4,000 acres, bees are not going to go there because lettuces do not produce flowers. Instead, they will go to the area around that tract of land, and they will try to make a habitat there if they can. If we have a small-scale farm and we use it with as many different types as we can, there's bound to be flowers that will attract the bees, and that will reduce habitat pressure on them. So monoculture is a pretty easy one to avoid. Instead of growing one type of apple or pepper, we'll grow many types. And they don't all have to be right next to each other. It's just to help increase pollination, which will help increase the insect population and the biodiversity of the plant life itself, but also prevent problems that come from only having one thing. If we have an insect or a disease that starts affecting one of these plants, it will likely affect all of them. And all of that pre-harvest treatment will be for nothing, further contributing to environmental change. Today we have a far better idea of how farming impacts our environment than we did 100 years ago. Society is retiring the outdated and inefficient cultural practices in favor of those that work with our environment to create a more sustainable future. Large-scale monocultural farms are giving way to microfarms that benefit the environment while feeding our future and the community. Using fewer chemicals, clearing land in a smarter way, farming on a smaller, more diversified scale are all ways that we can help reduce our impact on the environment. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I have a question. Yeah, I was thinking, what did that Melomus have to do with global warming?
That was actually the first mammal to go extinct due to global warming, according to National Geographic, because they live on a small island in Australia that really feels the effects of rising sea levels. So they pretty much estimated in 2014 that they all drowned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Any more questions?
Yeah, what are the disadvantages of not having a monoculture?
So the problems that can arise are really just, it's more legwork for you in terms of managing your practices. So when you're managing insects, you're going to have to deal with different insects instead of one. When you're dealing with a disease, you're going to have to know all different kinds of diseases that affect all different kinds of plants instead of just whatever crop you happen to be growing. Anything else?
Are there any sustainable fertilizers, and if so, what are they?
We can use things like compost, manure, like fish emulsion is a good one. You can buy organic fertilizers, or you can create your own at home. It's really up to you. But obviously, making them at home is more environmentally friendly, as you can use your own food scraps, and you don't have to buy the plastic that the container comes in. Anything else?
What's integrated pest management?
Integrated pest management is really using knowledge about the biology of your pests to accommodate the problems you're going to have with your crop. So if you know for example, if you know the life cycle of your pest, it's going to be a lot easier for you to know exactly how many and how often to apply whatever pesticide or whatever cultural practice you're using to avoid pests. You're going to know when to do that, how often to do it, so you're not going to use excess of anything. And it also includes stuff like there's certain types of flies that don't like light, so you can use a reflective surface as a mulching material that will get rid of them. So you don't have to use a pesticide or a chemical. You can use a physical barrier or any other kind of deterrent, really. All right, thank you.
No, that was sensational.
That was good. That was really good.
How long is it?
That was like 8 minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
It started at